Welcome back to the Observable Unknown. Trauma has become one of the defining words of our age. We use it to describe memory, behavior, nervous system response, illness, identity, family patterns, and the invisible adaptations that remain long after danger has passed. Yet awareness isn't always resolution. A person may understand exactly what happened and still feel governed by it. They may speak fluently about the wound, while the body continues living as though the wound were present. My guest today is Dr. Judith A. Swack, a biochemist, immunologist, author, and originator of the Healing from the Body Level Up methodology, known as HBLU. Her work brings together psychology, nervous system theory, neurolinguistic programming, applied kinesiology, tapping, unconscious processing, and energy psychology in an attempt to identify and clear patterns that traditional approaches may leave untouched. She's also the author of Clear Trauma Now, the powerful solution for getting unstuck. Dr. Swack's work makes a bold claim. Trauma doesn't always require years to resolve, nor must healing always depend on repeatedly reliving the original pain. That claim deserves curiosity, and it also deserves precision. Today we'll ask what trauma actually is, where its root can be located, and how HBLU works in practice. We'll also cover what evidence supports rapid resolution, where muscle testing fits, what the method cannot safely treat, and how anyone can know when trauma has truly ended rather than merely gone quiet. Because the question isn't simply whether suffering can be explained. The deeper question is whether it can stop organizing a life. So, without any further ado, let's join the conversation. Dr. Judith, it is an unmitigated pleasure to have you on the Observable Unknown. To begin, you've said that trauma can remain active beneath conscious awareness. So what exactly do you mean by trauma, and what do you consider its root?
So let's think about what a person really is. I've developed a healing methodology called Healing from the Body Level Up. I come from science. I'm a biomedical scientist. I have a PhD. I've done years of postdoctoral training in human immunology. So I see people as living animals with souls inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people come to see me when they feel stuck somehow. And they know consciously they want to achieve something in their life. They want to make more money. They want to get on track with their soul mission. They want to get happily married. They want to clear up a health problem. They want to heal family relationships, a bunch of stuff. But they aren't being successful at it because they're blocked somehow, but their conscious minds doesn't know what's blocking them. But they have a sense that there's something else going on and that I can help them find it. So I teach people that we are a composition, a multi-level composition of a conscious mind, an unconscious mind, a body, and a soul. And the reason the soul comes into the body, in my philosophy, is to do a soul mission. In other words, make a contribution to the planet so that the world is better off for you having been here. And mold this. I think of life as clay. So mold this life to have the best experience possible in this form, in this world, in this dimension. Learn the rules, get the tools, and mold a life that you want. So as you do that, your soul also grows and evolves. And because I believe that souls are made of God energy, and I believe that God is the large collective source energy of life, and I picture it in my mind as a green fluorescent amoeba with us as pseudopod extensions, right? As we grow and evolve, God grows and evolves. So on an individual soul, which is a unit or a packet of God energy, on that level, you want to create the best life possible in this body, in this form, in this time. So understanding that your conscious mind is the mind that you're aware of, but that everything else going on inside runs your life more than your conscious mind. Your unconscious mind runs 90% of your life. Your body runs your life. Your soul wants to run your life. So how do you organize? How do you organize what direction you want to go, actions you want to take, beliefs that work for you? How do you organize that? I teach them how to organize it around their soul, because their soul is their true identity. And the soul dictates all the work that we do in healing from the body level up. So I found that in terms of what interferes with the soul output and the results that you want is patterns from this life, patterns from past lives, patterns from your ancestors, and patterns that run at the conscious level, the unconscious level, the body, the soul level. There's religious and cultural brainwashing, there's gender brainwashing, all these things floating around, and dysfunctional family system patterns that are interfering with your throughput. So one of the most common patterns that interfere with throughput is trauma. And trauma is a body level issue. So trauma happens when somebody experiences something that's frightening to them. Now, remember, we have a fight or flight reflex built into the physical body. All the vertebrates, meaning all animals with a spine, have a fight or flight reflex because the body itself is very partial to surviving. So your unconscious mind and your body, through your five senses, and six if you have them, are always trolling the environment for danger. Danger. Is there danger? Am I in danger? Is there any danger? And this is going on subconsciously all the time. And when something happens that sends a signal through your sensory system that this body is in danger, it triggers a reflex. A reflex is an automatic reaction, right? A reflex called the fight or flight reflex that fires off a signal from your hypothalamus and pituitary, and it releases a hormone called ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. And it releases it right down the spinal cord, so it's nanoseconds fast, and it puts a bolus of ACTH into the circulation so that it lasts longer than just a nerve transmission. And when that happens, it sends the signal to your adrenal glands, which are sitting on top of your kidneys there. And the adrenal glands release adrenaline. You all know what adrenaline is. Woo! You get all pumped up and your heart starts beating rapidly and you get extra strong, and it releases cortisol, like cortisone cream, cortisol, and endorphins, which is the runner's high, the body's natural opiates. Mm-hmm. So what happens there? Because your body thinks it's in danger, it's preparing to fight or flight or freeze and protect itself physically. Now, the cortisol goes to the liver and releases glucose and ketones, which are used to fuel the muscles. I mean, if you're going to fight, you have to have fuel for those muscles. And the endorphins numb you out. And of course, the adrenaline pumps you up. Now, it turns out that because this is a reflex, it can be conditioned. So Pavlov, you've heard of Pavlov. Pavlov wondered if you could train a reflex, which seems silly because a reflex is an automatic reaction to something. How do you train an automatic reaction? So what he did was he took the salivation reaction in dogs and he actually put little tubes, little collection tubes in their mouths and held them with rubber bands. So he could literally measure the amount of saliva in the tube. That's a scientist for you, has to measure everything. And he would put food down and measure the amount of saliva in the tube. Then he rang a bell and there was no saliva in the tube. Then he rang the bell, put the food down, then there would be saliva in the tube. Then he rang the bell, didn't put food down, there was saliva in the tube. So basically, he conditioned the salivation reflex to the sound of the bell. And you cannot eat a sound. A sound is not food. It doesn't even smell. But the sound triggered the salivation reflex because now that sound was connected with the memory of food, which triggered the reflex. So the fight or flight reflex is a reflex, which means anything that was in your environment at the time can set off that reflex, that fight or flight memory. It turns out that when that happens, the part of your brain that measures time freezes so that that memory freezes in time and it does not process. So when you have a fight or flight reaction, it freezes in time, it stays stuck in your nervous system, and anything that was in the environment at the time can later trigger you into a full body flashback of that reaction. So one of the strangest flashback triggers I ever saw was fluorescent lights. I had a woman who had a phobic reaction. She would panic from fluorescent lights. How did that happen? Well, she was on a sales call and she had an attack of diarrhea and she had to excuse herself. She ran to the bathroom and it took her 20 minutes to like take care of herself and calm down and walk up and down and splash her face with cold water. Oh, I'm going to lose the sale. I can't be sick now, blah, blah, blah. And she finally returned to the office and finished the sale. And then after that, she would be triggered into that sort of panic reaction by fluorescent lights. Turns out that the office that she was sitting in at the time she had this experience, which is a traumatic experience in her body, had very bright fluorescent lights. Now, why is it a problem to have a panic reaction every time you see fluorescent lights? Well, because they're everywhere. And mostly she couldn't go to the shopping mall and go shopping, which was tragic because, she likes shopping. She couldn't go shopping anymore. So we went back to the scene where she was in the office. She had this diarrhea attack, feel the fight or flight reflex, the panic, whatever, the upset. And we treated it with a technique called tapping. Now, you might have heard of tapping because it's been out for 40 some years and people are just starting to realize that there is such a thing as tapping. And tapping.
With that, you're referring to EFT, emotional freedom technique, is that correct?
Yes. So tapping has been called emotional freedom technique. It's been called thought field therapy. It's been given a lot of names. And at this point, people are just calling it tapping, or they're calling it meridian tapping. But I named it natural biodistressing. I give it my own name because what the heck? You can name it anything you want. So I never thought tapping was strange. When it came out 40 years ago, people were skeptical. What do you mean you can clear a phobic reaction or a traumatic emotion by using your fingers to tap on your face? What? It sounded so silly to people. But for me, because I have a PhD in biochemistry, and one of my majors was neurochemistry, it just looked like neurochemistry to me. It looked perfectly natural because I knew that for every on system in the body, there's an off system. That's called homeostasis. So I knew that when you fire off the fight or flight reaction, it only fires off for about 20 minutes because when the levels of cortisol and endorphins rise in the bloodstream, it feedback regulates to your hypothalamus and pituitary and turns off the signal. It turns it off. So this is turn on, this is turn off. And it turns out that when people are stressed, they automatically self-soothe. It's natural. They go like this. Oh, they rub their forehead and they rub around their eyes. They massage their temples. They, put their hands over their mouths, or they hold their cheeks in their palms of their hands, or they grab under the chest, or they chew on their fingers, right? And these are just, or they hug themselves. These are natural behaviors that people do to self-soothe. It's unconscious even. But it turns out that all the places that people naturally grab are nerve endings that, when stimulated, trigger the calming reflex. So what they're doing is they're self-soothing by triggering their own calming reflex and managing their own stress levels. So if you know that you do that naturally, and you know that you have a fight or flight reaction to something, you can intentionally pull up that memory, flash back into it, feel it right as if it's happening now, and you can turn off the fight or flight reflex physically, intentionally, by tapping those nerve endings that turn on your calming reflex. So for me, I called it natural biodistressing because we do this all the time naturally. The only difference is you can do it on purpose and turn off your fight or flight reaction because you don't want it. How about that? You can do it on purpose. So I don't see it strange at all. So I teach that to my clients. I've had, videos on this and everything. And that's how you treat it, because it's a nervous system imprint. It gets stuck in the body. The problem is that you get triggered into flashbacks. It runs your behaviors and reactions. But if you understand that, you can turn it off on purpose. How's that?
That's excellent. Are there other modalities beyond TFT or EFT that you've applied for destabilizing the root of a trauma?
I have a menu of 52 techniques. And, about 10 of them are just different ways of triggering your calming reflex. So tapping will do it, but you can use a technique called AIT, which clears it from the chakras. For that, you just think about where do you feel that negative emotion in your body. And if it's in a chakra, like your heart chakra, your throat chakra. The chakra system, for those of you who don't know, is a system of energy centers that come through the center of your body, starting at the crown of your head and down to your perineum. And so you put your palm of your hand wherever that feeling is that's off, and the other hand, you literally touch the other chakras in order, and you say, I release this feeling, I release this feeling. And by the time you're done, which takes about 2 minutes, it's released. So you can release it with tapping, you can release it with a chakra clearing technique. There's something called frontal occipital holding. Again, you put your hand on your forehead, which is your frontal lobes of your brain. You put your hand on the back of your head in the bulge there, which is your occipital lobe, and you're basically connecting your rational mind with the back of your brain, which is your emotional mind, and you're coordinating rational and emotional, and then you let your head move however it wants to. It stops automatically when it's done, and it dissipates the emotion. It just dissolves out. So any technique that activates your calming reflex will shut off a fight or flight reaction, right?
Now, in
And the
terms of
point is,
research metrics, what has your success rate been with PTSD patients?
100%.
It's amazing.
Well, I developed a protocol, and I have tests, right? I measure their symptoms, and then we basically use these techniques to clear the fight or flight reaction, which is causing the PTSD symptoms. But that is a complex protocol. You have to do it with certain steps and certain orders. But tapping is the major technique I use to release it, but you have to know what you're focusing on. Again, if you know tapping and you just sit around and tap, that's all good for your stress release, but it's not going to clear any particular phobia or trauma. You have to literally pull the memory up and focus on it on purpose and then turn it off on purpose. So PTSD is layered. And what I forgot to mention is when people come to see me, I muscle test them. Now, muscle testing, have you heard of lie detector testing?
Yes, polygraph.
Yeah. And have you heard of muscle testing?
I have.
Okay. So the body will register true and false answers to true and false questions. And if you're in a police station, the reason they hook you up to a machine is they don't believe that your conscious mind's going to tell them the truth. So they hook up some sensors to your body to read your autonomic nervous system responses. And they ask you true and false questions. And your body will register certain signals for true and certain signals for false that you can distinguish. So I teach people how to do muscle testing, which is like lie detector testing, except instead of using an external machine to read the signals, we're just reading the body signals directly out of the body. After all, you're measuring the body signals. So there are many ways to do that, and we use muscle testing. So as soon as I teach my clients muscle testing, I teach their conscious minds how to connect in with their soul using muscle testing as the readout for the answers. So I basically say your conscious mind is Sherlock Holmes and I'm Watson. This is HBLU Mystery Theater. The attitude is inquiring minds want to know what's going on in the inner levels. And then I say, so it's your job, your conscious mind's job to come up with questions. It's your conscious mind's job to notice that something isn't working and notice when something doesn't make sense and notice when something's irrational because that's your logical mind. It's not supposed to have the answers, but it's supposed to notice and have the questions. And then once we figure out what we're finding, then your conscious mind turns into Santa Claus, goes down the chimney and connects with the part of you that's having that stuck energy, whether it's a trauma or a phobia or a dysfunctional family system pattern or religious brainwashing, whatever it is, it boils down to stuck energy. So your conscious mind's job is to connect in with that part of you with compassion, understand how it's thinking and feeling, understand what it's doing, and then bring a tool or a technique that will release that pattern at the level it's running. So I teach people tapping because that works at the body level and also at the unconscious level. I teach them unwinding frontal occipital holding that I just described. I teach them the chakra clearing techniques. I teach my clients techniques and I say, go and treat yourself for this. And anything that's complicated, I'll do that with you, but you do the simple stuff. And I think traumas and phobias are simple, but PTSD is not simple. You should not treat that at home. That you need a professional for. People who've trained with me know the protocol. You can go to my website, hblu.org, get a consult with me, or find a list of practitioners. But pretty much everything else in life you can treat. Everyday trauma, which is every day, you can treat with tapping.
For listeners who aren't aware of muscle testing, could you give an example of how you would execute that in a setting where you're treating a client?
So I either treat people in person in my office or remote through Zoom because I work with people all over the world. The challenge really is in matching time zones. So if they're in my office, I ask them to stand up and hold their arms out in front of them. Now, some people are familiar with muscle testing. They've been to a chiropractor or a nutritionist that muscle tests supplements or treatments. And they ask people to hold their arm out to the side at shoulder height. And they say, hold or resist. And then they have the person say a true statement and they press down on their arm and it holds. And they have the client say a false statement and they press down on the arm and it goes down. So I don't want to do that 10 hours or 12 hours a day. I'm 5'2". Most everybody who comes in to see me is bigger than I am, and I'm not going to spend 10 to 12 hours a day wrestling with people's arms and telling them to resist. Because in my world, everything is easy if you know what you're doing. So I'm always looking for the easy way to do something. So I ask people to float their arms out in front of them. Float them. Don't hold them out rigidly. Don't resist. Don't struggle here. Just float your arms out in front of me. And I do the same thing. I press above their wrists. I ask a true question. I press above their wrists and their arms hold. And I ask a false question and I press above their wrists and their arms float down. And it's very easy. So that's how I do it in my office. Now, it's
A false
interesting.
question. So tell me, what would a false question sound like? Would you ask them if their name was something different than what was assigned to them? Would you ask them about?
Yes. I would say my name is Judith. If it's Judith, it'll hold. Say my name is Frank. If they're not Frank, it'll go down. Right.
And then from there, you would start asking questions to probe where the source of their trauma was, what the
Exactly.
environment
Well,
looked like.
first I would send the question from your deepest wisdom. That means I'm addressing their soul because we're saying where we're sending the question. From your deepest wisdom, does this being, and when I say being, we're a multi-level being. I'm not just talking to your conscious mind, so I don't say you because people mistakenly think that you is their conscious mind when it's not. So I say, does this being have a priority goal you would like to work on today? And if the answer muscle test yes, of course they do because why are they at my office? I'll ask them to go inside and tune into their soul and ask what they want to work on today. And then they will make guesses. I call this the guess and test section of HBLU Mystery Theater. Now, of course, I've interviewed them before they come to see me, so I know what we're going to be working on. And I ask them to write me a biography and a list of goals. So we have some idea what they want to work on. But interestingly enough, sometimes they muscle test that the priority goal is not on the list that they wrote. In which case, I look them in the face, I go, well, guess and test. So let's say their deepest wisdom comes up with a goal, and we muscle test it. And the goal is get happily married. That's one of my favorite goals. And I muscle test, is that right? Yes, is it not? And does it need additions or modifications for accuracy or completeness? So it's worded properly. And then I ask for permission. From your deepest wisdom, does this being give 100% permission to balance for this goal? Just double checking. And they give permission. And then I say, all right, what is the priority interference on this goal? Because now we want to know what's blocking them, yeah? So I have a menu of about 400 different patterns. So I'll ask what kind of pattern it is and muscle test them through the list. So we might find that the priority interference to getting happily married is a trauma, and it's a trauma age 12. Well, muscle test, when did it happen? So I'll look them in the face and say, conscious mind report. You have a trauma age 12 pertaining to this goal of getting happily married. What comes to mind? And we'll see if they can pop it up. They tune in and they go, oh, well, my parents got divorced, age 12. I'll muscle test. Is that right? Yes. Okay, so we're going to have to work on clearing this divorce because in your unconscious mind, you think marriage leads to divorce because that's what happened and that's what stuck with you. And remember, trauma is irrational. And even worse, the way we're organized is that we believe what we feel, even if it isn't true. And the more strongly you feel something, the more you believe it. So trauma has a lot of energy. So you feel it strongly. So you believe the negative emotions and you believe the beliefs that imprint at that moment. So you have to clear that out with tapping or something similar to actually free yourself from that belief and free yourself from that feeling so that it's no longer associated with marriage. Because you see, marriage would be a trigger to flash you back into that trauma. Again, the Pavlovian conditioned reflex stuff. So you don't want to associate marriage with divorce. Well, that makes sense. So then we treat the trauma and we erase it. Then we ask, is there anything else interfering on the goal of getting happily married? And if the answer is no, I say, how do you feel about dating now? Oh, I'm excited about it now. Good. So I send them out to date. And then we see the kind of people and relationships they attract. Now, let's say they're dating and they attract somebody, but the person is right, but just not 100%. There's just something not quite a fit here. Then we muscle test and we ask, do we need to balance you to find just the right relationship? Because I teach people, you're not looking for the right person. There are many people who would be right for you in this world. It isn't just one soulmate. That's an illusion. There are many people who are right for you, but you're attracting somebody who's almost right, but not 100%. Is there something blocking you from finding somebody right for you 100%? And if it is, then we clear whatever that is and send them out again and see who they attract. It's one of my favorite things to do, really. So the trick is having a very good menu of patterns so that you know what you're looking for. Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you can't ask the question, you'll never find it. And have a really good menu of techniques that will clear that pattern energy at the level that it's imprinted. Now, think about this. A lot of people try to talk themselves out of how they feel. And they even get upset with themselves. Their conscious mind gets upset and starts yelling at themselves and criticizing themselves and being really mean. But when you ask yourself, is being mean to myself actually the best technique for clearing this pattern or clearing this reaction or clearing this bad habit? Is being mean to yourself the best technique for clearing this pattern? No, because it doesn't actually work. Being mean to yourself doesn't at all affect the behavior or the reaction. Why doesn't it? I mean, being mean to yourself, a lot of people do it. Why doesn't it work? Because being mean to yourself is a conscious mind technique, and the problem is at the unconscious mind. It's not that there's something wrong with being mean to yourself, although I think it's not a good idea. It's that it's not going to work mechanistically because it's running at the wrong level. You understand?
I do. I do. Now, you've said that people don't always need to relive painful memories in order to heal them. What happens to the memory during HBLU work?
It dissolves and disappears.
Do
It's
they
very
lose the
funny.
memory? They actually forget? Is that what you're saying?
They don't forget. It just dissolves. It gets dissolved from their brain.
Mm.
So, for example, let's say somebody experienced violence, sadly. And so, in terms of getting happily married, and this is a woman and she's heterosexual, she's afraid to let a man get near her because her father beat the kids. And so she now has, a grown man is a trigger to flash her back to grown men beat people. They're dangerous. And that's unconscious, but she's going to be reacting to it. You're a grown man. That means you could beat me. So what we do is we go back to the memory of her father beating her or her watching him beat her brother or something. And where in your body do you feel the shock and fear? And we erase the whole thing. Now, if I asked when she's looking at the memory or when she's recovering the memory, when I ask how does she represent that, it may be that she is inside her body in that memory, looking out of her own eyes as a child, watching her father beat her brother over there in front of her. And it's in color and it's moving. And she's hearing the shouting, so it has sounds to it. And as we tap, what happens is the color fades, the light fades out, the shouting disappears, it becomes silent. She now is no longer in her body watching. She's above it, looking down, and the memory, instead of being in front of her, is a tiny little thing, and it's basically behind her, like 15 feet. Because what happened was, it's not happening now, and it went back on her timeline, back into history where it belongs. So it's an old memory, it's faded, it no longer has any energy on it. So she may remember intellectually that, yes, I witnessed my father beat my brother, but she doesn't have any energy on it. And the way it's stored in her brain is it's a faded old memory. Does
So
that
it
make
loses
sense?
the emotional charge, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And not only is the emotional charge gone, but the way it's represented is completely different.
Mm,
In
it's
in the
fascinating.
in the sensory system, in the memory system, it's gone.
Your work also touches on chronic illness and physical pain. Tell me, how do you discuss trauma's effects on the body without suggesting that illness is merely psychological?
Well, it's never a question. It's not an issue because we ask the deepest wisdom, what's the highest priority goal? So the highest priority goal is clear this illness. And then I ask, okay, what's causing the illness? And I run through my menu of techniques. And it'll either say it's caused by this emotion or this trauma, or it's caused by a physical injury here or an old infection. It'll just tell us what it is. So there's nothing personal about it. It's just what's causing this, go find it and treat it. That's all.
So, in the case of a client who, for instance, was suffering with broken heart syndrome and maybe developing a warping of the aortic valve, what would you propose? Speeding up the grieving process,
Well,
eliminating the grief?
no, the deepest wisdom would say the priority goal is heal the broken heart. I've seen that before. It says, heal my broken heart. Great. From your deepest wisdom, what's causing the broken heart? If it's a romantic breakup, trauma, we go in and heal that. And when we use the techniques to heal it, all the emotion and feeling that goes with it dissipates, and there's no more feeling of broken heart because we cleared the trauma. On the other hand, I had somebody who had AFib, and he had a very, very low heart ejection rate, meaning your heart fills up with blood and it pumps it out. And the ejection rate is how efficient is the pumping out from the filled volume, right? So when your heart fills up and it pumps out, it's supposed to pump out like 50% of the blood or better to get into your circulation. This man accidentally found out, because he broke his arm and had to go to the emergency room, he found out that he was having heart failure and he was about to die. He had no idea. And his ejection fraction was 15%. So he had heart failure. And of course, they put him on all kinds of medication and so on and so forth. And he was upset. So he called me up. Well, the priority goal was fully functioning heart. That was the priority goal. And his heart was functioning at, I don't know, 50% fully functioning. And we wanted it 100% fully functioning. So we muscle tested what was causing the heart failure. It turns out that he had been an alcoholic for decades, and he had stopped drinking about 10 years earlier when he developed and became part of a spiritual group that does energy healing. And he was an active participant in this energy healing spiritual group, and he stopped self-destructing, basically. So, his spiritual practice saved him. So it turns out there were 2 or 3 things that were causing the heart failure. One was physical injury trauma to the body from alcohol poisoning. So we treated that as a simple physical injury trauma, the alcohol poisoning. The second thing that was causing the problem was he had a lot of repressed anger. I use the Enneagram model of personality, and there are 9 different types in that model of personality. And he had a personality type where he was afraid of his own anger and he would repress it. And where was he holding all that anger in his body was his heart. That's where it was. So we cleared his phobias of feeling anger, and then we drained all that backlog of anger that was in his heart. And guess what? I think we did one more. He had a dysfunctional family system pattern where he was in disagreement with his family about certain things. We cleared that pattern, and he sent me the heart tests. His ejection rate went to 65%. 50 is normally went to 65%. And he was down to like 2 medications from like 6. So there was a physical cause, but like it was a physical injury trauma, even though he wasn't drinking anymore. And then there was a couple emotional causes, and that took care of it.
It's fantastic. When a high achiever feels anxious, exhausted, or self-defeating, how do you determine whether the issue is trauma rather than burnout, temperament, environment, or an ordinary conflict of values?
Yeah, I muscle test and ask their deepest wisdom what's causing it. And I'm going to tell you, what's interesting is mostly that feeling of dissatisfaction with their life has to do with disconnection from their soul, conscious mind disconnection from their soul, because the soul has the purpose. The soul has the purpose. And if you're disconnected from your soul purpose at the conscious level, then you're not really doing what's meaningful to you and satisfying. And what puts people off track is cultural brainwashing, for example, where people are raised in this culture and these school systems to achieve and create a life of material success. The house with the white picket fence, the wife and 2 kids and the dog, and you're a doctor or a lawyer, or in these days, you're a computer engineer doing AI programming and making a lot of money doing that. But that might not be what your soul is about. So I've known people, this is interesting. I had a man who got married, had a wife and 4 children. He started a company. He made a lot of money, but he never felt satisfied. But he felt as a man, he had to provide financially for his wife and kids. Although his wife was a nurse and she worked, but she didn't have the kind of money that she could live a fancy lifestyle and support a husband and 4 kids on a nurse's salary. So when he retired, he said, all right, I'm retiring now and I have my retirement money. I don't need to make any more money. My kids are grown. Now I'm going to do what I really want to do. At this point, he was 65, 70 years old. Once he decided he was going to do what he really wanted to do deep down, because he was free to do it now, he started having screaming nightmares. The 7 days in a row after he decided I'm free to do what I want to do, he had screaming nightmares. And he was referred by his wife, and he came in and said, I've been having screaming nightmares. I said, all right, let's find out what's causing these nightmares. And it turns out that the deepest wisdom said that the priority goal was do my soul mission. And what was interfering was a past life trauma. You can imagine how strange he thought that was. But I didn't blink. I just said, this is what's coming up. This is your unconscious mind, and we're going to just treat it and see what happens. So he went along with it. It was a past life trauma where he got killed for doing his soul mission. So this life, he spent all his time doing something that wasn't his soul mission to make money and justified it as, this is what a man does. But when he finally was free to do his soul mission, he flashed back into the memory where he'd been killed for doing his soul mission and started having screaming nightmares as he was flashing back in his dreams. So we went back in time and used tapping and holy light, because holy light is a technique, yes, light, to cleanse the trauma memory from that past life and erase it from all the lifetimes since then up till now, so that he could start over fresh in this lifetime and do what he came to do without dragging the memory of a past life trauma into his current life. And after one session, all his nightmares stopped. That was it. That's all it took.
Yeah, that's really
So,
tremendous.
as I said, I'm a scientist. The unconscious mind is a zoo. And anything somebody says to me, I don't even blink. I'm like, all right, let's muscle test that and go there. And really, the question is, and what do we do with it? I don't really care what they tell me as long as their deepest wisdom says that is, and I have a technique that'll work for it. And then, of course, how I measure results is I measure results. He stopped having nightmares. Or people get happily married, they get married. That's what happens. I go to their weddings. Yay. Or somebody wants to lose weight, we can measure it in pounds. Somebody wants to lower their blood pressure, we can measure it in a blood pressure cuff. Somebody wants to repair their heart, we can measure it with tests and get numbers. I'm a numbers person. So I'm very much into concrete results that are measurable in reality, because, I'm a scientist. I like to measure things.
Mm-hmm.
And they can come in and their deepest wisdom will lead the healing. And I just have a really good menu of patterns accumulated and developed over the years. And I've accumulated a really good menu of techniques. And I just have their soul tell me, pick from column A, these are the patterns, pick from column B, these are the techniques. We apply them, we measure results, boom. That's how I know anything. Because I don't care what they call it or what they say. I just need to know how can we measure it and how do we know that we got that. So I don't really care how we get there as long as we get there.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And that's clearly the best route for treatment. And where would a listener go to either read up on your protocols or to book treatment?
My website is hblu.org, healing from the body level up.org, hblu.org. And you can sign up for a free 15-minute consult with me. I'm giving a webinar. I decided to do mass trauma healing because so many people suffer from it and don't know that you can heal trauma in hours, not years. And I just published a book called Clear Trauma Now. So I'm doing a live webinar series where I do hour and a half, trauma healing.
Mm-hmm.
And people attend and I say, what trauma do you want to treat? We all treat that trauma. And of course, you know that of all the umpteen people on the call, a large percentage of them all have the same trauma because we're in human life. We all have the same trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fun. You can sign up for that course. I am training professionals to do healing from the body level up. You can sign up for my training. Go to my website and find out when the next training is. Because I do give continuing education credits to mental health professionals and I train them how to do this. Really I want to spread the work. I don't think people need to suffer. If they just knew what they were doing, they could just treat themselves for the everyday trauma, go to experts for the more complex traumas and the other things that, like dysfunctional family system patterns, are multi-level. So that takes an expert for that. But daily trauma, it's everywhere.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Judith. I appreciate having you on today. And your insight is both elegant and unique. I'm hoping
Oh,
that
thank
many
you.
people will find great relief by either viewing your protocols or perhaps asking for a service from you or from one of your referrals directly. Hopefully we'll have a chance to chat again, and I look forward to that opportunity when it presents itself. My thanks again to Dr. Judith A. Swack for joining me today. This conversation returned us to a distinction that matters deeply. Understanding trauma isn't always the same as resolving it. A person may know the history, they may recognize the trigger, they may understand the family pattern, the nervous system response, and the belief that formed around the original wound. Yet knowledge alone may not persuade the body that danger has ended. Dr. Swack's Healing from the Body Level Up methodology asks us to consider trauma as a pattern distributed across several levels at once: conscious thought, unconscious expectation, bodily response, emotion, relationship, and meaning. Her approach also raises difficult and necessary questions. What does it mean to say trauma has been cleared? How should rapid results be measured? How do practitioners distinguish lasting change from temporary relief? Where do expectation and suggestion enter the process, and when does ethical care require referral to a physician, psychiatrist, or licensed trauma specialist? These questions don't weaken the search for healing, they protect it, because anyone carrying trauma deserves more than hope alone. They deserve honesty, safety, evidence, competent care, and a method capable of recognizing its own limits. Perhaps the most useful thought to carry forward is this: the past may explain the pattern without being entitled to continue it. If today's conversation gave you something useful, make that known. Leave a rating or a review, not for recognition, for signal. And until next time, remember, you don't become what you feel, you become what you return to, and what you return to returns as you.